Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today.
Hello, I am the computer, and I thought I would introduce the show today.
She even has my permission.
Which I really don't need.
Oh, I see.
On the show today, Jackson makes a comment. Yanaba tells us about Yenaldlooshi, and Betty will tell us a creepy story about her encounter with one-eyed kids.
Computer? That's black-eyed kids?
It's your fault. You wrote the script.
I don't seem to remember that. Also, you forgot to mention our featured story about accidental death in space.
Again, you wrote the script.
But I didn't.
Anyway, we begin it all with this amazing
5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Snap Judgments. We all make them, and 9 times out of 10, we're dead wrong. Kind of like the guy in our story today. What snap judgment did he fall prey to? Let's listen in and see.
Hello, Lieutenant.
There you are, Mr. Campbell. I've been waiting for you very anxiously since your call.
I hurried down here as fast as I could.
Mr. Campbell, if your evidence can give me a clue to the identity of Mr. Martin's killer, we'll break this case wide open.
Lieutenant, it's not an easy thing for me to bear. First, my partner was killed, and now with this photograph I'm putting on your desk, I condemn as the murderer
His wife? Good heavens. Why didn't you show me this sooner?
I thought you might suspect her and solve the case, and I would have been able to remain silent.
Look at this picture. It's the perfect evidence. His body on the floor in front of the couch and she leaning over him, with a gun still in her hand. Why, this'll send her to the chair.
I know. It wasn't easy for me to give it to you.
How on earth did you ever get it?
Well, I had an appointment with my partner at a little after 11 p.m. at his house.
Mm-hmm.
When I came up the walk, I was surprised to see that the house was dark.
Oh, yeah.
You see, you must pass the large bay window in the living room when coming up the walk. The room was very dark, but by the faint light from some burning coals in the fireplace, I could see Mr. Martin's body lying in front of the large couch.
You could?
Yes. I saw my partner's wife come into the room. She had a gun in her hand.
Well, how did you get the picture?
Well, I've always been a camera enthusiast. I happened to have a small box camera with me, and without her noticing me, I took a picture of the room.
It's really a remarkable photograph.
I've kept it hidden for several days, but when you found no trace of the murderer, I decided that you would have to have it.
I'm glad you did, Mr. Campbell. It isn't exactly safe to withhold evidence, but now we have it, and it looks like the Martin case is closed.
Yes?
Mr. Campbell, there's a gentleman from the police department to see you.
Oh, send him in. Always glad to help the police. Well, hello, Lieutenant. It's good to see you.
Sorry to bother you, Mr. Campbell. It's about the Martin case.
Oh, but I thought the case was closed. You've arrested Mrs. Martin, haven't you?
Yes, but there are some points about the case that still puzzle me.
Really? But you have the evidence in black and white.
But have I? Will the jury accept the picture? You've heard of process shots, haven't you?
No, I don't believe I have.
You're lying, Mr. Campbell. That picture you gave me was a phony. And I can prove that your whole expedition that night was a contrived fairy tale.
How does the police lieutenant know that Campbell lied in his story? In just a moment, we'll know, but first...
Wow, a quick and easy murder captured by the snap of a photo. Seems to me it's a done deal, but our detective seems to think otherwise and that the photo is fake. Perhaps the snap judgment in this story is from the detective. Either way, this amazing story is being brought to you by Snap Judgments Made Everywhere.
And now, back to our story.
Mr. Campbell, you don't think I fell for that story about your being a camera hound and accidentally being on the spot for the picture of the year, do you? For if you were a photographer, as you claim, you'd know that the feeble light from a dying fire is hardly enough with which to take a picture in a darkened room. If you'd used a flash, she would have seen you, but that was impossible. Because she wasn't even in that room. But you were, Mr. Campbell. And you killed your partner and dummied up this fake picture to throw a blame on his wife. Snap judgment's supposed to be a dangerous thing, Campbell. You proved it.
Fake photos? I didn't even know they had a Photoshop way back in the 40s.
Ron, they did not.
Then how did they do it?
With a technique called photo processing.
Oh, how very cool. Anyway, this 5-minute mystery was brought to you by Snap Judgments. Judge not, lest ye be judged. I just made that up.
No, you didn't.
What's that you say?
A couple of weeks ago, I told you I was working on the podcast categories on the main website. That task has been completed and is ready for your approval. I hope you like it. Basically, I have created simpler categories that should make it easier to find the podcast you're looking for. For example, all of the shows that feature a Ghost Stories with Sylvia are now in their own category. For a complete breakdown of this project, head to the blog site and read this week's post. There I go into much more detail. We've talked about this before. Not everyone is a fan of the show, and here is an email from Jackson who challenged me to read his on the air. He writes, "Hello, Ron. I'll bet you're like every other podcaster out there and only reads the good stuff. I dare you to read this on your show. I hate your format. It lacks consistency and is all over the place. You need to pick one theme, go with it, or you will never be successful. You have too many components, and it's hard to follow, and please dump the silly 5-minute mysteries. They are dumb. R. Jackson." Well, Jackson, first let me say that you are right about the 5-minute mysteries. They're dumb. But that's the point. The silliness of them is what makes them so fun. I think you mean well with your comments, but I have no plans to change the format of the show. It's actually evolved from what you are suggesting to what it is today. It's its randomness that makes the show unique. And as far as I know, there's nothing like it out there. But I do completely understand if it's not your cup of tea. Thank you, Jackson, for your comments. If anyone else has comments about the show, please let me know. I want to hear them all. And now, this word from Audible. Today's podcast is being brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So, what am I listening to right now? Believe it or not, I found a book that has been around since 1881. It is the original Treasure Island, narrated by Marty Ross. This is not just another reading of the Robert Louis Stevenson classic. Marty has taken this to a whole new level by adapting the story to an incredible radio-type drama feel. It is complete with character voiceovers and even a rendition of 16 Men on a Dead Man's Chest. You just gotta hear. If you're not familiar with the story, which I highly doubt, young innkeeper Jim Hawkins thought he had seen his fair share of characters until old sailor Billy Bones arrives at the inn. When Bones dies mysteriously, Jim stumbles upon a treasure map leading to a stash of buried pirates' gold. Arr, me bucko. The Disney version of this tale was my favorite until I heard this one. It truly is amazing. Now, you can have Treasure Island today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. Audible is offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. If you do that, you can be sailing with Jim Hawkins today. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
This time we have two crazy stories from the land of enchantment, New Mexico. I'm continually amazed by the number of stories we get from there. I can't say that I'm totally surprised, though. Consider that some of America's greatest mysteries have come from there. Everything from Roswell to the Aztec UFO, and the ghost of Old Town to the Tahoe's hum. New Mexico truly is a strange and wonderful place. This first story comes from Yanaba Walsh, who currently lives in Billings, Montana. She has titled it, Yenaldlooshi Visits Grandma. Hello, Ron. Your podcast is amazing, and I thank you for all you do. Every week you say that you want my story, so it becomes our stories. I thought about that for a while, and I think I finally get it. You're right, if we don't share our stories, they could quite possibly end with us. So here is mine about a visit we made to my grandma a few years ago. She's always been very superstitious, for lack of a better word. She's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal stuff. She is a full-blooded Navajo and has never been anywhere east of Montana, and she grew up in New Mexico. I was still in grade school when my family went to visit her one summer on the Navajo Nation. Most of the visit was pretty uneventful, typical boring old people stuff. One odd thing was that she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would peek out the window. When I asked her what she was doing, she would simply reply, "Yenaldlooshi is watching me." This went on for nearly the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my little brother, he's 19 now, were in the front yard that evening planting flowers. When all of a sudden, my grandmother starts shouting, "Sonny, get away from that creature. It's not safe." Of course, being in New Mexico, we all assumed that my little brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake. We all ran outside to see my grandmother clutching Sonny and shaking in terror against the side of the house. That was not all we saw. Standing out in the yard was a large, black Great Dane-sized creature. It was staring at my grandmother with an intensity like I've never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and then bounded off. I remember that it moved unusually fast and had deep yellow eyes. Bad enough, but I also remember it ran away on its hind legs. When my mother asked what had happened, my grandmother kept repeating, "Yenaldlooshi has found me. Yenaldlooshi has found me." We packed up for home the next day. My grandmother wished us all well and said a prayer in Navajo for each one of us. We learned later that she sold her home and moved away. She still lives on the Navajo reservation today and still keeps her curtain drawn. Yanaba Walsh, Billings, Montana. That is an incredible story, and thank you, Yanaba, for sharing it with us. I do know a little bit about Yenaldlooshi. The English version of that is Skinwalker. The tale, or legend of the Skinwalker, is common to the native people of New Mexico. It is rooted deep in their history and tradition, and like many things we don't understand about different cultures, it should command our respect. Skinwalkers have been reported by both native and non-native people, including stories in New Mexico of skinwalkers being seen by state police on a particular stretch of roadway in the Navajo Territory. Our next story comes from Betty Waite. Yes, I said Betty Waite, not White. She is writing us from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hello, Ron. I was very interested in the chat that you had with Jason. Black-eyed kids have been an interest of mine for some time since I had an experience with them. I would like to tell you my story, but I'm not sure how to write it. I've never written anything before and would love to work with you on it. Betty. Well, of course, I got right back to her and we set up a time to chat. Here is Betty's story that she has called Bus Encounter. I was riding a bus back home after work. It was about 1 a.m. I am a security guard and often work odd hours. So I'm sitting here and this guy gets on, sits across from me. He's wearing a suit, had a briefcase, a regular-looking guy in his 20s. What struck me about him at first was that he was chewing a cigar, not smoking it. I was looking at him while he stared out the window and chewed on his cigar. All of a sudden, he turned and looked at me. His eyes were pitch black. My heart started beating like a mad hatter, and I felt my stomach rising. I was starting to panic, and I had no idea why. I was just terrified of this guy. Then he grinned at me, and his teeth were all covered in tobacco bits and brown juice. The cigar still clamped between them. I almost screamed, but instead I had the presence of mind to just get up and take a seat behind the driver. I calmed down a bit after that, but kept an eye on the guy. When I reached my stop, I was horrified to see him get up and follow me out of the bus. I was relieved when he turned to the right and I walked to the left. I live a couple blocks from the bus stop, and tonight I thought I would do it in record time. I was walking past the entrance to a local park. I then heard a child's voice come out of the darkness. It asked a simple question. "Mommy?" I stopped and turned. Standing there was a little girl. She was dressed in a very nice black dress. From what I could see, it even looked like a formal. She had no expression on her face, but it still didn't look right. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, and it was then I saw her eyes. They were as black as sin. I felt a surge of terror go through my body, and I reached into my bag for my stun gun. The little girl said, "You're not my mommy," and when I looked up, she was gone. I turned tail and ran the rest of the way home. When I reached my apartment building, I quickly opened the security door and rushed inside. A wave of relief flowed through me, but I didn't sleep well for the next few nights. In fact, I don't take the bus anymore. I have a friend drive me home. Betty Waite, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thank you for your story, Betty. Also, I had a nice time chatting with you on the phone. Like I told Jason in episode 391 last week, I don't understand this BEK phenomena. I have so many questions about what it all means. Maybe someday we'll all figure it out. Do you have a story that you want to tell on the show? If you do, we want to hear it. It can be about any subject and from any genre. Heck, it doesn't even have to be true. Original fiction or stories from the public domain are quite welcome. To submit them, just head to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Story Submissions banner. Fill out the form, and soon your story will be heard. Do you have a story but don't want to write it? That's okay too. Just leave your contact information, a brief description of your story, and I'll get back to you. We can write it together. However, if you don't do it, your story remains just that, your story. Why not make it our story? Our featured story this week comes from Astounding Science Fiction Magazine, February 1959. Do you believe in luck? Or is luck just a superstition? Can what we do or how we believe change our reality? And can that power, or the lack thereof, become a weapon? The story you are about to hear addresses this subject. It is titled Accidental Death, was written by Peter Baily, and is read for us by Giles Baker. The most dangerous of weapons are the ones you don't know are loaded.
Accidental Death by Peter Baily. The wind howled out of the northwest, blind with snow and barbed with ice crystals. All the way up the half-mile precipice, it fingered and wrenched away at groaning ice slabs. It screamed over the top, whirled snow in a dervish dance around the hollow there, piled snow into the long furrow ploughed ruler straight through streamlined hummocks of snow. The sun glinted on black rock glazed by ice, chasms and ridges and bridges of ice. It lit the snow slope to a frozen glare, penciled black shadow down the long furrow, and flashed at the furrow's end on a thing of metal and plastics, an artifact thrown down in the dead wilderness. Nothing grew, nothing flew, nothing walked, nothing talked. But the thing in the hollow was stirring in stiff jerks like a snake with its back broken, or a clockwork toy running down. When the movements stopped, there was a click, and a strange sound began. Thin, scratchy, inaudible, more than a yard away. Weary, but still cocky, there leaked from the shape in the hollow the sound of a human voice. I've tried my hands and arms and they seem to work, it began. I've wriggled my toes with entire success. It's well on the cards that I'm all in one piece and not broken up at all, though I don't see how it could happen. Right now I don't feel like struggling up and finding out. I'm fine where I am. I'll just lie here for a while and relax, and get some of this story on tape. The suit's got a built-in recorder, I might as well use it. That way, even if I'm not as well as I feel, I'll leave a message. You'll probably know we're back, and wonder what went wrong. I suppose I'm in a state of shock. That's why I can't seem to get up. Who wouldn't be shocked after luck like that? I've always been lucky, I guess. Luck got me a place in the whale. Sure, I'm a good astronomer, but so are lots of other guys. If I were 10 years older, it'd have been an honour being picked for the first long jump in the first starship ever. At my age, it was luck. You'll want to know if the ship worked. Well, she did. Went like a bomb. We got lined up between Earth and Mars, you'll remember, and James pushed the button marked jump, took his finger off the button, and there we were, Alpha Centauri. 2 months later your time, 1 second later by us. We covered a whole survey assignment like that, smooth as a pint of old and mild, which right now I could certainly use. Better yet would be a pint of hot black coffee with sugar in. Failing that, I could even go for a long drink of cold water. There was never anything wrong with the whale, till right at the end, and even then I doubt it was the ship itself that fouled things up. That was some survey assignment. We astronomers really lived. Wait till you see. Of course you won't. I could weep when I think of those miles of lovely colour film all gone up in smoke. I'm shocked, all right. I never said who I was. Matt Hennessy from Farside Observatory, back of the moon, just back from a pivoting flight come astronomical survey in the Starship Whale. Whoever you are who finds this tape, you're made. Take it to any radio station or newspaper office. You'll find you can name your price and don't take any wooden nickels. Where had I got to? I told you how we happened to find Chang, hadn't I? That's what the natives called it. Walking, talking natives on a blue sky planet with 1.1 g gravity and 20% oxygen atmosphere at 15 psi. The odds against finding Chang on a 6-sun survey of the first star jump ever must be up in the Googles. We certainly were lucky. The Chang natives aren't very technical. Haven't got space travel, for instance. They're good astronomers, though. We were able to show them our sun in their telescopes. In their way, they're a highly civilized people. Look more like cats than people, but they're people all right. If you doubt it, chew these facts over. 1. They learnt our language in 4 weeks. When I say they, I mean a 10-man team of them. 2. They brew a near beer that's a lot nearer than the canned stuff we had aboard the Whale. 3. They've got a great sense of humour. Ran rather to silly practical jokes, but still, can't say I care for that hot foot and belly laugh stuff myself, but tastes differ. 4. The 10-man language team also learned chess and table tennis. But why go on? People who talk English, drink beer, like jokes and beat me at chess or table tennis are people for my money, even if they look like tigers in trousers. It was funny the way they won all the time at table tennis. They certainly weren't so hot at it. Maybe that 10% extra gravity put us off our strokes. As for chess, Svendlov was our champion. He won sometimes. The rest of us seemed to lose whichever Chingsi we played. There again, it wasn't so much that they were good. How could they be in the time? It was more that we all seemed to make silly mistakes when we played them, and that's fatal in chess. Of course, it's a screwy situation playing chess with something that grows its own fur coat, has yellow eyes, an inch and a half, and long white whiskers. Could you have kept your mind on the game? And I don't think I fell victim to their feline charm. The children were pets, but you didn't feel like patting the adults on their big grinning heads. Personally, I didn't like the one I knew best. He was called, well, we called him Charlie, and he was the ethnologist, ambassador, contact man, or whatever you like to call him, who came back with us. Why I disliked him was because he was always trying to get the edge on you. All the time, he had to be the top. Great sense of humour, of course. I nearly broke my neck on that butter slide he fixed up in the metal alleyway down to the Whale's engine room. Charlie laughed fit to bust. Everyone laughed. I even laughed myself, though doing it hurt me more than the tumble had. Yes, life and soul of the party, old Charlie. My last sight of the minnow was a cabin full of dead and dying men, the sweetish stink of burnt flesh, and the choking reek of scorching insulation. The boat jolting and shuddering and beginning to break up, and in the middle of the flames, still unhurt, was Charlie. He was laughing. My God, it's dark out here. I wonder how high I am. Must be all of 50 miles, and doing 800 miles an hour at least. I'll be doing more than that when I land. What's final velocity for a 50-mile fall? Same as a 50,000-mile fall, I suppose. Same as escape. 24,000 miles an hour. I'll make a mess. That's better. Why didn't I close my eyes before? Those star streaks make me dizzy. I'll make a nice shooting star when I hit air. Come to think of it, I must be deep in air now. Let's take a look. It's getting lighter. Look at those peaks down there, like great knives. I don't seem to be falling as fast as I expected, though. Almost seem to be floating. Let's switch on the radio and tell the world hello. Hello, Earth. Hello again, and goodbye. Sorry about that. I passed out. I don't know what I said. if anything, and the suit recorder has no playback or eraser. What must have happened is that the suit ran out of oxygen and I lost consciousness due to anoxia. I dreamed I switched on the radio, but I actually switched on the emergency tank, thank the Lord, and that brought me round. Come to think of it, why not crack the suit and breathe fresh air instead of bottled? No, I'd have to get up to do that. I think I'll just lie here for a little bit longer and get properly rested up before I try anything big, like standing up. I was telling about the return journey, wasn't I? The long jump back home, which should have dumped us between the orbits of Earth and Mars, instead of which, when James took his finger off the button, the mass detector showed nothing except the noise level of the universe. We were out in that no place for a day. We astronomers had to establish our exact position relative to the solar system. The crew had to find out exactly what went wrong. The physicists had to make mystic passes in front of meters and mutter about residual folds in stress-free space. Our task was easy, because we were about half a light year from the sun. The crew's job was also easy. They found what went wrong in less than half an hour. It still seems incredible. To program the ship for a star jump, you merely told it where you were and where you wanted to go. In practical terms, that entailed first a series of exact measurements, which had to be translated into the somewhat abstruse coordinate system we used based on the topological order of mass points in the galaxy. Then you cut a tape on the computer and hit the button. Nothing was wrong with the computer. Nothing was wrong with the engines. We'd hit the right button, and we'd gone to the place we'd aimed for. All we'd done was aim for the wrong place. It hurts me to tell you this, and I'm just attached personnel with no space flight tradition. In practical terms, one highly trained crew member had punched a wrong pattern of holes on the tape. Another, equally skilled, had failed to notice this when reading back. A childish error, highly improbable, twice repeated, thus squaring the improbability. Incredible, but that's what happened. Anyway, we took good care with the next lot of measurements. That's why we were out there so long. They were cross-checked about 5 times. I got sick, so I climbed into a spacesuit and went outside and took some photographs of the sun, which I hoped would help to determine hydrogen density in the outer regions. When I got back, everything was ready. We disposed ourselves about the control room and relaxed for all we were worth. We were all praying that this time nothing would go wrong, and all looking forward to seeing Earth again, after 4 months' subjective time away, except for Charlie, who was still chuckling and shaking his head, and Captain James, who was glaring at Charlie and obviously wishing human dignity permitted him to tear Charlie limb from limb. Then James pressed the button. Everything twanged like a bowstring. I felt myself turned inside out, passed through a small sieve and poured back into shape. The entire bow wall screen was full of Earth. Something was wrong all right, and this time it was much, much worse. We'd come out of the jump about 200 miles above the Pacific, pointed straight down, travelling at a relative speed of about 2,000 miles an hour. It was a fantastic situation. Here was the Whale, the most powerful ship ever built, which could cover 50 light years in a subjective time of 1 second, and it was helpless. For, as of course you know, the star drive couldn't be used again for at least 2 hours. The Whale also had ion rockets, of course, the standard deuterium fusion thing with direct conversion. As again you know, this is good for interplanetary flight, because you can run it continuously, and it has extremely high exhaust velocity. But in our situation it was no good, because it has rather a low thrust. It would have taken more time than we had to deflect us enough to avoid a smash. We had 5 minutes to abandon ship. James got us all into the minnow at a dead run. There was no time to take anything at all except the clothes we stood in. The minnow was meant for short, heavy hops to planets or asteroids. In addition to ion drive, it had emergency atomic rockets using steam for reaction mass. We thanked God for that when Casamian cancelled our downwards velocity with them in a few seconds. We curved away up over China, and from about 50 miles high, we saw the Whale hit the Pacific. 600 tons of mass at well over 2,000 miles an hour make an almighty splash. By now, you'll have divers down, but I doubt they'll salvage much you can use. I wonder why James went down with the ship, as the saying is. Not that it made any difference. It must have broken his heart to know that his lovely ship was getting the chopper. Or did he suspect another human error? We didn't have time to think about that, or even to get the radio working. The steam rockets blew up. Poor Casamir was burnt to a crisp. Only thing that saved me was the spacesuit I was still wearing. I snapped the faceplate down because the cabin was filling with fumes. I saw Charlie coming out of the toilet. That's how he'd escaped. And I saw him beginning to laugh. Then the port side collapsed, and I fell out. I saw the launch spinning away, glowing red against a purplish black sky. I tumbled head over heels towards the huge curved shield of Earth 50 miles below. I shut my eyes, and that's about all I remember. I don't see how any of us could have survived. I think we're all dead. I'll have to get up and crack this suit and let some air in. But I can't. I fell 50 miles without a parachute. I'm dead, so I can't stand up. There was silence for a while, except for the vicious howl of the wind. Then snow began to shift on the ledge. A man crawled stiffly out and came shakily to his feet. He moved slowly around for some time. After about 2 hours, he returned to the hollow, squatted down, and switched on the recorder. The voice began again, considerably wearier. Hello there. I'm in the bleakest wilderness I've ever seen. This place makes the moon look cosy. There's a precipice around me every way but one, and that's up. So it's up I'll have to go till I find a way to go down. I've been chewing snow to quench my thirst, but I could eat a horse. I picked up a shortwave broadcast on my suit, but I couldn't understand a word. Not English, not French, and there I stick. Listened to it for 15 minutes just to hear a human voice again. I haven't much hope of reaching anyone with my 5 milliwatt suit transmitter, but I'll keep trying. Just before I start the climb, there are 2 things I want to get on tape. The first is how I got here. I've remembered something from my military training. When I did some parachute jumps, terminal velocity for a human body falling through air is about 120 miles per hour. Falling 50 miles is no worse than falling 500 feet. You'd be lucky to live through a 500-foot fall, true, but I've been lucky. The suit is bulky, but light, and probably slowed my fall. I hit a 60-mile-an-hour updraft this side of the mountain, skidded downhill through about half a mile of snow, and fetched up in a drift. The suit is part warm, but still operational. I'm fine. The second thing I want to say is about the Chingsi, and here it is. Watch out for them. Those jokers are dangerous. I'm not telling how because I've got a scientific reputation to watch. You'll have to figure it out for yourselves, and here are the clues. 1. The Chingsi talk and laugh, but after all they aren't human. On an alien world 100 light years away, why shouldn't alien talents develop? A talent that's so uncertain and rudimentary here that most people don't believe it might be highly developed out there. 2. The whale expedition did fine until it found Chang. Then it hit a seam of bad luck. Real stinking bad luck that went on and on till it looks fishy. We lost the ship. We lost the launch. All but one of us lost our lives. We couldn't even win a game of ping-pong. So what is luck? Good or bad, scientifically speaking, future chance events are by definition chance. They can turn out favourable or not. When a preponderance of chance events has occurred unfavourably, you've got bad luck. It's a fancy name for a lot of chance results that didn't go your way. But the gambler defines it differently. For him, luck refers to the future, and you've got bad luck when future chance events won't go your way. Scientific investigations into this have been inconclusive, but everyone knows that some people are lucky and others aren't. All we've got are hints and glimmers, the fumbling touch of a rudimentary talent. There's the evil eye legend and the Jonah bad luck bringers. Superstition? Maybe. But ask the insurance companies about accident prones. What's in a name? Call a man unlucky and you're superstitious. Call him accident prone and that's sound business sense. have said enough. All the same, search the space flight records, talk to the actuaries. When a ship's working perfectly and is operated by a hand-picked crew of highly trained men in perfect condition, how often is it wrecked by a series of silly errors happening one after another in defiance of probability? I'll sign off with two thoughts, one depressing and one cheering. A single Chingsy wrecked our ship and our launch. What could a whole planet full of them do? On the other hand, a talent that manipulates chance events is bound to be chancy. No matter how highly developed, it can't be surefire. The proof is that I've survived to tell the tale. At 20 below zero and 50 miles an hour, the wind ravaged the mountain. Peering through his polarized visor at the white waste and the snow-filled air howling over it, sliding and stumbling with every step on a slope that got gradually steeper and seemed to go on forever, Matt Hennessy began to inch his way up the north face of Mount Everest. End of Accidental Death.
Fascinating story. Did you find yourself being held captive by it? I know that I was, and I had to listen to it twice to get it. Giles Baker, our storyteller, did an amazing job getting it right. The story is left open-ended, and it is up to us to decide if our hero can make it up and off of Mount Everest. Is he lucky enough? What do you think? This story first appeared in Astounding Stories 1959, and if you had told me that it had been written last week, I'd be inclined to believe you. The author, Peter Baily, certainly was ahead of his time. I tried to find out more about him, and I came up empty, which, sadly, is the case of most of these old pulp magazine classics. And now, for a moment in time. The date is June 17th, 1951, and this is A Moment in Time. What you are about to hear is something pretty special I found. It is a daily radio update from the Iron Man of radio, Robert Trout. More about him later. What I like about this broadcast is the frankness of it. Listen to this time capsule as it was broadcast from 1951.
Here's Robert Trout in the latest news in a program presented by the Norwich Pharmaceutical Company, makers of Pepto-Bismol, Unguentine, Norwich Aspirin, and other dependable drug products.
The Chinese Red troops have stopped retreating in Korea. They're moving back in stronger numbers inside that Iron Triangle where so many of their offensives began. Whether this is really the build-up for another massive communist attack is a question that's not been answered yet. There's been another battle of the jets. 25 Red MiGs shot it out with 20 American Sabre jets. One Red plane down, 6 damaged. No American planes lost or damaged. A single enemy plane flew over Incheon, the port of Seoul, and dropped 4 bombs into the water. As a result, the talk has started again. Speculation that the communists are getting ready to throw a big air punch at the United Nations. But that's another question still in search of an answer. The Reds, though, are afraid we are getting the answers to too many questions. The official communist newspaper in Beiping says there's a serious loss of state secrets in China and warns all Chinese to stop talking loosely or they may stop talking permanently. The big news in Europe is the election in France, where 3 sides are fighting it out with ballots. The communists on the left, the followers of General de Gaulle on the right, and in between the middle-of-the-roaders who've been running things since the war. Though the polls have been closed for several hours, there are no significant returns yet, but the French voters have already exercised their democratic privilege of embarrassing the prophets by turning out at the polls in great numbers, despite the predictions that the vote would be light after a campaign in which practically nobody seemed to be paying attention. It was only 5 minutes after the polls closed that French President Auriol announced he has softened the life sentence of Marshal Pétain, the old soldier of World War I, who decided the Germans were going to win World War II. The 95-year-old Marshal will be allowed to end his days in a hospital if it turns out he's strong enough to be removed from his prison. There's another different kind of echo of World War II from Poland, where it's reported today a 32-year-old German soldier has just been rescued from an old underground supply dump where he was accidentally buried alive 6 years ago. When he was first sealed in, the Germans had not yet lost the war. Now this Hitler veteran can join the rest of us in wondering how you tell who won it. Today, West Berlin is getting ready to clamp a new counter-blockade against Soviet East Berlin. And in the western sector of Germany, a couple of hundred German police in Bonn slugged it out with 2,500 young communists who said they were protesting against Western Germany's becoming militaristic, forced to do so by the Allies. I'll be back in a moment after this message from the makers of Pepto-Bismol.
Here's good news for all those who suffer the distress of upset stomach. It's been proved in actual hospital tests that gentle, dependable Pepto-Bismol gives deep, thorough medication no soda or alkalizer can hope to equal. For Pepto-Bismol works where soda and alkalizers fail, guards against trouble, not in the stomach alone, but along the many feet of intestines below the stomach where food can ferment and cause discomfort every inch of the way. Pepto-Bismol guards against biting, burning acids, lines irritated stomach and intestinal walls with a soothing coating. And this deep, thorough medication helps settle and sweeten, calm and quiet the upset, helps give prompt, long-lasting relief. So for Mother, Dad, and the children, keep a bottle of Pepto-Bismol handy. And when stomach's upset, don't add to the upset. Take hospital-tested Pepto-Bismol and feel good again.
Here at home, senators investigating General MacArthur's dismissal say the committee will decide that the manner of the firing was deplorable but won't agree on anything else. Federal Narcotics Commissioner Anslinger says his bureau can wipe out the illegal trade in narcotics if Congress will make it somewhat more dangerous to peddle dope than to drive through a red light. There's a rumor that the 2-day-old maritime workers' strike may soon end in a compromise. And Dartmouth College has just honored a student who slept through 4 years of classes, a seeing-eye dog who went to college with her master. She got a certificate and became Dartmouth's first female graduate. And that's the news.
Robert Trout was brought to you by the Norwich Pharmacal Company, makers of Pepto-Bismol, Unguentine, Norwich Aspirin, and other dependable drug products.
I love hearing these old recordings, and what I find most amazing is that the very same problems that plague us today were around 70 years ago. This report was from Robert Trout. He was an American broadcast news reporter, best remembered for his radio work before and during World War II for CBS News. He was regarded by some as the Iron Man of radio for his ability to ad-lib while on the air and for his stamina, composure, and perfect speaking voice. How about that? And now, this message from Gladdy's Goodies.
I'm Gladdy, the dachshund, the face of Gladdy's Goodies. Are you worried about your pet's health? My parents were too, especially since I developed pancreatitis. They couldn't find any treats I could eat, so they made some. Our natural treats are healthy for all dogs, with and without health issues. We have lots of delicious flavors like chicken, turkey, salmon, sweet potato, beef, and more. With our homemade treats, you won't worry about the contents because they have no chemicals, fillers, or bad ingredients. Go to GladysGoodies.com now to get your fur friend a bag. And pick them up some swag while you're there. You'll be glad you did. Remember, we have the treats and swag to make their tails wag. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com.
Don't forget to use our very own promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all your purchases. That is RONS. Thank you, Gladdy.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a short story that first appeared in Amazing Stories magazine in November of 1942. Before each article, the editor would print a short introduction to what you were about to read. Here is that preface for a story called Hard Guy. There will be fine, glittering, streamlined automobiles in 2000 AD. Possibly they will run themselves while the driver sits back with an old-fashioned in his hands. Perhaps they will carry the folks down the highway at 90 miles per hour in perfect safety. But picking up a hitchhiker, well, that will still be as dangerous as it is today. Hard Guy by H.B. Carlton. He was standing at the side of a glassite superhighway, his arm half raised, thumb pointed in the same direction as that of the approaching rocket car. Ordinarily, Frederick Martin would have passed a hitchhiker without stopping, but there was something in the bearing and appearance of this one that caused him to apply his brakes. Martin opened the door next to the vacant seat beside him. "Going my way?" he asked. A pair of steady, unsmiling eyes looked him over.
"Yeah."
"Well, all right then. Hop in." The hitchhiker took his time. He slid into the seat with casual deliberateness and slammed the car door shut. The rocket car got underway once more. They rode in silence for about a half a mile or so. Finally, Martin glanced at his companion's expressionless profile. "Where are you heading for?" he asked.
"Dentonville."
He spoke out of the corner of his mouth. "Oh, yes, that's the next town, isn't it?"
"Yeah."
Not very communicative, reflected Martin, noticing the rather ragged condition of his Celolex clothing. "Have much trouble getting rides?" The passenger turned his head. His blue eyes didn't show any emotion.
"Yeah, most guys are leery about picking up hitchhikers. Scared they'll get robbed."
Marston pierced his lips and nodded. "Something to that, all right. I'm usually pretty careful myself, but I figured you looked okay."
"Can't always tell by looks,"
was the calm reply.
"Of course, us guys mostly pick out some guy with a swell atomic mobile if we're going to pull a stick up. When we see an old heap like this one, well, there's usually not enough dough to make it pay."
Martin felt his jaw drop. "Say, you sound like you go for that sort of thing. I'm telling you right now, I don't have enough cash on me to make it worth your while. I'm just a salesman, trying to get along."
"You got nothing to worry about,"
his passenger assured him.
"Stick-ups ain't my racket."
An audible sigh of relief escaped Martin. "I'm certainly glad to hear that. What is your, racket anyway?" His blue eyes frosted over.
"Look, chum, sometimes it ain't exactly healthy to ask questions like that."
"Pardon me," Martin said hastily. "I didn't mean anything. It's none of my business, of course." His eyes flickered over his contrite expression.
"Skip it, pal. You look like a right guy. I'll put you next to something. Only keep your lip button. See?"
"Oh, absolutely."
"I'm Mike Egan, head of the Strato Rovers."
"No." Martin was plainly awed. "The Strato Rovers, huh? I've heard of them, all right." The other nodded complacently.
"Yeah, we're about the toughest mob this side of Mars. We don't bother honest people, though. We get ours from the crook and racketeers. They can't squeal to the interplanetary police."
"There's a lot to what you say," agreed Martin. "And of course that puts your mob in the Robin Hood class."
"Robin Hood? Nuts. That guy was a dope, running around with bows and arrows. Why, we got a mysterious ray that paralyzes everyone that stands up with us. They're all right when it wears off, but by that time, we get away."
Martin was properly impressed. "A mysterious ray. With a weapon like that, you should be able to walk into a bank and clean it out without any trouble." His passenger's lips curled.
"Told you, we don't bother honest people. We even help the SPD sometimes. Right now, we're working with the Earth-Mars G-Men rounding up a gang of fifth columnists that are planning on taking over the government. They're led by the Black Hornet. This Black Hornet goes around pretending like he's a big businessman, but really, he's an international spy."
"A what?"
"An international spy,"
repeated Marston's companion.
"The EMG men say he's the most dangerous man in the country, but he won't last long with the Strato Rovers on his tail."
Martin nodded. "I can believe that. Tell me, Egan, what are you doing out here around a small Earth town like Dentonville?"
"Government's building some kind of ammunition place near here, and I understand the Black Hornet's figuring on wrecking everything. Of course, He won't get away with it.
Scattered houses on either side of the road indicated that they had reached the outskirts of Dentonville. Mike Egan pointed ahead to a small white house set back amongst a cluster of trees.
There's where I'm holed up. Drop me off in front.
A young woman in a faded blue satin house dress was standing at the gate of a white picket fence. She watched in silence as the passenger stepped from the rocket car and lifted his hand to the driver in a careless farewell.
Thanks for the lift, chum,
said Mike Egan. Not at all, replied Martin, glad to have been of service to Mike Egan. The woman smiled to him.
He's told you his name, I see.
Martin lifted his hat. Indeed he has.
Michael's all right,
she said.
I do think, though, that he reads way too many Buck Gordon interplanetary comic books for a boy of 11.
The End of The Hard Guy by H.B. Carlton. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little short. When you consider that it was written in 1942, it should take on a whole new light, even if you're only 11 years old. To quote Queen, another one bites the dust. This week, I want to thank R. Jackson, Yanaba Walsh, Betty Waite, and Giles Baker for taking part in this magic we call a podcast. Do you want to follow the show or the blog? Just head to ronsamazingstories.com where you'll find every link you'll need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends about it. And please take a minute and leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.